On today's Star Wars Legends lore video, we look at whether the Confederacy of Independent Systems could have won the Clone Wars. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars Legends lore video. Today we are taking a closer look at the Clone Wars, trying to determine whether the Confederacy of Independent Systems actually stood a chance. We're imagining today a scenario where Palpatine and Dooku both suffer amnesia sometime before the Battle of Coruscant and start acting in the best interests of their faction. Palpatine also loses his Force connection, but remains the important figurehead of the government, holding the Galactic Republic together. When seeing whether someone had already made this idea into a video, I came across one by Generation Tech. I think it's really well done and I quite liked it. We have some really similar ideas, but also some different ones. I decided that it was still worth making one myself. There's a link to Generation Tech's video in the upper right hand corner. One thing that he does bring up is the Republic Commando novels, which provide some excellent insight into the Clone Wars. It was actually a quote from the book Order 66, which drove me to create this video. A current affairs pundit says, "We've invented a separatist threat that's bigger than the reality. The claims of quadrillions, quintillions, and even septillions of separatist battle droids is so ludicrous that we'd rush to debunk it if someone didn't have a vested interest in making us believe it. Nothing adds up, literally. Do you know how big a quadrillion is? Let's use the galactic standard notation, 1,000 million million." He continues, saying any coalition capable of producing even quadrillions of any machine could roll over the Republic in a few days, and the amount of materials and energy needed to produce and move even a quadrillion droids is immense. It would drain star systems. Either our government is composed of innumerate idiots, or it's inflating the threat way beyond the average citizen's math skills so that it can justify the war and where it's heading. I think that this pundit named Bassett is totally correct. It's clear that the Separatist menace was overstated in order to justify Palpatine's militarization of the Republic and the continual transfer of power away from the legislature into the executive. The book kind of winks at this by suggesting that after making this quote, Mr. Bassett was covertly assassinated. However, just because the threat was overstated does not mean that the CIS would have lost the war. Although the Confederacy was eventually defeated, that was largely due to self-sabotage by its leaders, including the killing of Dooku, the failed attack on Coruscant, the loss of Grievous, and the events on Mustafar. We have to remember the goal of the CIS was not to take over the entire galaxy. They were primarily looking to be recognized as a sovereign government outside of the jurisdiction of the Republic. A win for the CIS means the war is ended and the Republic recognizes the legality of the Separatists. I see a post-Clone Wars CIS looking like a larger, more formalized and legalized version of the corporate sector authority, especially as the CSA existed during the Galactic Civil War, where it operated independently from the Empire. With this goal in mind, I think that victory by the CIS was actually not only attainable, but the path the galaxy was heading. There are a few factors which I think lead to this. The first is Republic vulnerabilities. The Republic had literally no standing army or navy before the Clone Wars. They relied totally on Kamino and other cloning production facilities for every clone and thus almost every soldier that they fielded. Rothana Drive Yards, which is a Kuat subsidiary, also produced most of their vehicles and starships. Separatist facilities were much more spread out, with various large corporations each providing their own assets, although there were still some key planets like Geonosis. I think without Sidious limiting the CIS's strategy, planets like Kamino and Kuat would be heavily hit repeatedly by Confederate forces. Taking or even orbitally bombarding those planets would have been much more important than the attack on Coruscant and would have really hamstrung the Republic's war efforts. What I'm trying to say is that the Republic's production was already limited by relatively slow cloning methods where the CIS could continually pump out soldiers. Without Palpatine, I think the CIS would have hit these production facilities quite heavily, and as the war of attrition dragged on, I think the Republic would have become demoralized. Tying into this is the general war fatigue, which had really started to bite into the Jedi Order. This actually existed even before the Clone Wars started and was worsened by the fact that the Republic did not have a standing army. army. The Jedi Order was not created to fight wars, and the Jedi were not meant to be fighters. Rather, their main role was in peacekeeping. The number of Jedi had been dwindling since even before the Clone Wars began, as we learn in Plagueis. As the Order continued to lose members, I think the Jedi would have pushed heavily for the Chancellor to engage in peace talks with the CIS. They already did this to an extent, but Palpatine, who obviously had ulterior motives, totally rejected the calls for peace from not only the Jedi, but also from the other members of his government. By the time of the Battle of Coruscant, there really was a serious level of war weariness within the Republic. The Revenge of the Sith novelization reveals that Palpatine himself is really the one holding the Republic together, and if he were to die, the war would not be able to continue. However, it wasn't just the populace that wanted peace, it was countless senators like Padme who continually petitioned to the Chancellor and the Senate to begin peace negotiations. I think the main reason that these negotiations failed is because Palpatine obviously didn't want them, and because the CIS was vilified and deliberately made frightening. I think more rational minds would have realized that the Republic and the CIS could coexist. The Separatists only claimed a very small portion of Republic space, and really after the war, there's no indication that aggressions would have continued and that the two governments couldn't work together. The final thing I want to talk about is a general advancement in CIS technology, which I think is fairly clear throughout the Clone Wars. Although at the beginning of the war, the Separatists relied mostly on low-level droids and droid starfighters, by the end, the CIS had developed countless new deadly weapons of destruction. I think the best example of this is the Tri-Fighter. The programming of the droid Tri-Fighter was many times better than the standard starfighter unit. So much so that Anakin even talks about how advancements like this are changing the war, and a single droid Tri-Fighter gives him and Obi-Wan a very hard time. On the ground, vehicles like the Separatist Super Tank and units like the Magna Guards were becoming more and more effective at fighting Republic forces. And this is even ignoring the self-sabotage that we know the Confederacy engaged in. For example, the Cartosis battle droid was so effective that Sidious did not allow it to be mass-produced. This really comes back to production capability. When fighting a long galactic scale war, the faction which is able to not only keep pumping out units, but to further develop their methods is the one that will have a serious advantage. Everything that I've talked about so far leads me to believe that under natural leadership, the Confederacy would not only have a good chance in the war, but last long enough to actually win themselves, garnering peace between their faction and the Republic. The Jedi were not meant to be warriors. They were tired of fighting, their numbers were dwindling quickly, and the Confederacy was developing new technologies which made killing Jedi even easier. Both senators and the galactic populace were also getting tired of fighting. I think this would have been exacerbated by successful attacks on planets like Kuat and Kamino. I think with the Separatists able to produce as many battle droids as they want, unhindered by Sidious and without the self-sabotage of Confederate leadership, I think they easily could have fought the Republic to at least a stalemate, resulting in a peace and the eventual formation of a legitimate Separatist government. That is, however, just my opinion. What do you think? Do you think the Separatists, without the influence of Darth Sidious, could have won the war? Let me know that and anything else you want down in the comment section. If you guys want to further support the channel, consider joining the Discord, and also I've created a Steam group for a future EckhartsLadder game night. We will be playing the classic Star Wars Battlefront 2, the 2005 version, so if you're interested in that, make sure to join. Until next time guys, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.